Welcome back, grade 9 biologists, to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack exactly how scientists piece together evolutionary history and will trace our very own primate family tree. I'm super excited to guide you through this because looking at the hard evidence for how life changes over time is absolutely fascinating. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit our objective, dive into the evidence of evolution, explore how evolutionary theory is shaped, and then move from primates to hominins. Finally, we'll do some quick checks for understanding and wrap it all up with a recap. Section 1, Explainer Objective, Tracing History. Our main goal today is to outfit you with the actual scientific tools of evolutionary evidence and then immediately apply them to our own primate lineage. To pull that off, we need to know what those tools are. Scientists essentially rely on 5 distinct lines of evidence. We've got the fossil record, comparative anatomy, comparative embryology, comparative biochemistry, and geographic distribution. When you stack all of these together, you get a remarkably clear picture of common ancestry. Section 2, Evidence of Evolution, Looking at the Clues. Let's dive right into these clues and see how they build our understanding. In comparative anatomy and embryology, scientists look really closely for what we call homologous structures. Basically, these are structures in different species that are similar simply because they share a common ancestor. What's wild is that vertebrate embryos actually exhibit these homologous structures during their early phases of development. Then, as they grow up, those exact same blueprints develop into totally different adult forms. Now, the fossil record is a massive piece of this puzzle because it brings history to life. It shows us exactly how modern species resemble ancient ones. Take a look at this heavily armored creature. This is a glyptodon, which is an ancient ancestor of the modern armadillo. Now, sure, the glyptodon is absolutely massive compared to the armadillos we see today, but you can clearly spot the striking physical links that have persisted across millions of years. Which leads us perfectly into our next line of evidence, comparative biochemistry. This chart tracks the differences in a really complex metabolic molecule called cytochrome C. When you compare the amino acid differences between humans and other organisms, a super distinct pattern emerges. The rule here is incredibly simple. The fewer biochemical differences a species has with humans, the closer the evolutionary relationship. Notice how the monkey has very few differences compared to us, while the moth or something like candida yeast has quite a few more. Common ancestry is literally written into our molecules. Section 3, Evolutionary Theory, Adaptation Consequences. As we look at all these evolutionary changes, we also have to wrap our heads around the broader theory. We often tend to think of evolution as this process that perfectly fine-tunes every single trait for survival, right? Well, that's not always how it works. Not all features of an organism are actually adaptive on their own. Sometimes, features are just the side effects or consequences of other evolved characteristics. Think about human babies. They are born at a much earlier, much more helpless developmental stage than other primates. Why? Well, it's very likely a consequence of humans evolving larger brain sizes right alongside an upright posture. To safely survive birth through a bipedal pelvis, the brain can really only get so big in the womb. It's an incredible evolutionary trade-off. Section 4, Primates to Hominins, Evolutionary Lineage. So let's take those evolutionary principles and apply them specifically to our own group, the primates. If we want to trace our lineage, we first need to define what exactly makes a primate a primate. A defining feature across humans, apes, monkeys, and lemurs is a high level of manual dexterity. This is your ability to easily grasp objects and manipulate them in your hands. And let me tell you, that is a total game changer for interacting with the environment. Alongside those grasping hands, primates share a whole suite of core characteristics. They evolved flattened faces to help with binocular vision, and unspecialized teeth, which lets them eat a pretty wide variety of foods. They also rely heavily on their hind limbs for getting around. But arguably the most important feature, primates have large brains, with way more brain area dedicated to vision and memory rather than, say, smell. And that brain capacity is exactly what unlocks complex problem-solving and those intricate social behaviors we see. Now, within that giant, diverse primate family tree, there's a very specific branch called the hominins. Hominins are human-like primates that are predominantly bipedal. That means they walk upright on 2 legs. By definition, hominins are the species that evolved after the evolutionary split, making them much more closely related to present-day humans than to present-day chimpanzees or bonobos. And fun fact, today we humans are the only surviving hominin species left. So, a crucial point here is making sure we don't get our terminology crossed. We really need to distinguish the broader group called hominoids, which includes all the great apes, From the more specific hominins, hominins are the group that branched off from that common hominoid ancestor, and they define their unique lineage by walking on two legs. Let's throw this on a timeline to really visualize it. DNA and fossil evidence both suggest that humans and chimpanzees diverged from a common hominoid ancestor roughly 6 million years ago. From there, the hominin line went through a ton of evolutionary change. Fast forward a few million years, and somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million years ago, our specific genus, the genus Homo, first makes its appearance in the fossil record. One of the most famous early members of our genus is Homo habilis. That name literally translates to handyman because of the stone tools found right alongside its remains. Homo habilis is a textbook example of an evolutionary transition. It shows us a complete mosaic of traits. On one hand, you have more advanced human-like features, like a larger brain, around 600 to 750 cubic centimeters, and a jaw that didn't jut out quite as much as older ancestors. But on the other hand, it held on to older hominin traits, like long arms that were still perfectly suited for climbing trees. Evolution definitely doesn't happen all at once. Section 5, checks for understanding. Test your knowledge. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, from fossils to Homo habilis. Let's pause and think about this first question. When we picture hominin evolution, should we imagine a single, straight line of descent, leading directly from the oldest ancestors right up to modern humans? Take a quick second to think about that. If you said no, you hit the nail on the head. In the past, scientists kind of thought it might be a straightforward line, but recent fossil discoveries prove it's actually a bushy, complicated tree. Multiple hominin species were totally coexisting at the same time. Many of the fossils we dig up actually represent evolutionary cousins that eventually died out, rather than our direct ancestors. Let's do another quick formative check on our terminology. Based on what we just went over, what is the key distinction between a hominoid and a hominin? Remember, hominoids is the big umbrella term that encompasses all great apes. Hominins, however, are the specific bipedal lineage that evolved after splitting from the chimpanzee line. Basically, if it walks exclusively on two legs and is closer to us than a chimp, you've got yourself a hominin. Section 6. Final recap. Wrapping up concepts. All right, let's wrap this up by cementing everything we've learned today. We unlocked the core evidence of evolution. We saw how the fossil record, anatomical homology, and biochemical similarities provide really hard evidence for how species change. We also learned that adaptations can carry secondary consequences, like the helplessness of human infants. And finally, we saw how core primate traits, like manual dexterity and large brains, laid the groundwork for that bushy, complex tree of hominin evolution that eventually led to us. And this leaves us with a truly fascinating, provocative thought to ponder. If our past evolution came with unexpected trade-offs, like upright walking resulting in helpless infants, what brand new physical consequences might the hominins of the distant future inherit from the world we are shaping today? Evolution is a continuous process, and the next chapter is completely unwritten. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and